Hello. We're going to start by getting ready to grind some corn. I have some corn here that is still on the cob, and to get it off, I just go through and knock that off with my thumbs and get all of the corn off the cob. Okay, try to keep stuff where you can see what I'm doing, and not be too boring about it. This is our Indian, actually it came from the Cherokee Nation, flour corn. It's not particularly good to eat like sweet corn. It's thick. You can eat it. It has a great flavor, but it's hard to chew. Very tough. And it is made specifically to grind into cornmeal and corn flour. And if you get one that's, you can do it just right, you can just wipe your hands around it and it comes off. Sometimes they're stuck a little more hard. But anyway, you get the idea. You take the corn off of the cob. Alright. So, you don't have to we don't have to do this all day, because I've already done a lot of it. And I've got some corn. Now, I'm pouring it into the colander, because as I swish that around in the colander, see what a lovely mess that's making on my board there. That's all the little pieces of cob that will kind of come off as you're doing that. And we want to get some of that excess stuff out. Look for any little pieces of corn husk that might be in there. There's usually some silks in there. I try to get all that cleaned out. We want our grain pretty clean before we start grinding. Okay. Now, that's actually pretty good, though I will probably still keep sifting it a little as I go along. But there is the grain ready to go. Now we're going to work on the grinder. And Magic Hand over here is turning another camera on for me so we can get some close-ups. This is my grinder that I bought off eBay or Amazon, and I'm going to take the whole thing apart. We've been using it on a very loose, see how loose that is? Been using it on a very loose setting, grinding corn for the pigs to eat. We're just cracking the corn, not really grinding it into a meal and adding it to their ration. So we had it on here really loose. So I'm taking it apart for a couple of reasons. Clean it out, get it reset, and also because I want to show you how it works. Okay, I'm not going to take the cotter pin out here, but there are two rough plates that as they work together, the meal gets ground in between those plates, and it actually cuts it more than mashes it. You'll hear terms like oatmeal, you'll hear steel cut, different kinds of grinds, but what this does is the ridges on those plates, it gets the grain in between and kind of shears off pieces of it. Okay, so really loose. It's pretty well cleaned out from having the other corn in it. And yeah, we've just been buying corn from co-op to feed the pigs. Been buying whole corn and grinding it and adding it to their other meal. Okay, so this is a little bit of a guard to kind of keep it from flying everywhere, and putting this on, if I can get it on, is what's going to put tension on that plate to tension it down tight. So we put the little guard on, tighten its little wing nuts up.
Hold just a second.
Okay. This will clamp to any countertop or anywhere you want to use it. And we've got it on here pretty tight because we've been using it every day. Back that out a little bit. You want those pretty even. And then this guy goes on. And that tightens your grinding wheel up. I want it a little tighter than we've been using it. And a few spins. Feels pretty tight. I'm going to put a little corn through there and we're going to see how it goes. So that corn that I just cleaned up, I'm going to put some handfuls of that in here. Start our grind. And see, it gets a lot quieter once it's got some corn in there to grind. And actually, this is coarse cornmeal, but, and of course what went in there first came out a little more coarse. Now that it's got a lot in, it's grinding a little more fine. Oops, I see a corn silk. Pop that out of there. But actually it's doing pretty good. This is going to be, you know, a coarse ground cornmeal. Now, I'm going to grind this all the way through. Oh yeah, that noise, that's great. Okay, now, another thing that I often do, let's look at that. What's on top there is pretty nice cornmeal. But I'm going to run that all through a second grind. Now that's going to go through pretty quick. Okay. So that came through pretty nice. It's definitely what I would call a coarse grind. I'm going to tighten this thing up a little bit more all the way around.
Okay, I'm going to stop and go again.
Okay. I tightened this up. I can still turn it, so I haven't gotten it too tight. And I'm going to try another batch through here. All right. So this is with the grinder tightened more and just the corn going through the first time. Oh yeah. That down a little tighter, that's coming out just beautiful. Now, you can play with that adjustment. If you're making a cornbread that you want a good crunchy crunch to it, and you want it a little thicker grind, you can do that. So that's what I put in here. Just about to get to the end of it. Or at least I thought I was. There we go. Now that was this container. It's a cornmeal container. It was about, it says it's a pound. But, you know, I had the corn in it. It was almost full. And it made this nice big bowl. Okay, but what I'm going to do now, yikes, try to break my nice big bowl, is I'm kind of just going to run this through. Am I still there? Okay. Run this through my strainer into another bowl. Actually, I'm going to put it right back in the same bowl and see how we did. Just kind of sift it back in there. And you may have noticed it didn't just all fall right through, so that means it's pretty thick. And I'm going to say at this point, since very little of that is sifting through the way I'd like it to be, I'm going to kind of continue, let some of that sift out, and then I'm going to run this back through and grind again, because there's a lot in there that's bigger than I want it to be. Turn it off. Now, this has been run through again. I'm going to, sorry about that shot there. Ugh. Going to sift some through again. If I can do it without spilling it all, that's key. That feels pretty soft and fluffy now, really nice. Haven't gone through the grinder again with the plates closed tighter. There, we got it down to where it'll sift out. And like I said, what's left in here, a bunch of skins, things you don't really want anyway, but the pigs are going to love it, so that'll go in the pig food. Yeah, want to make sure I get it all out. I waste not, want not, but that looks like it's down to the scrap. Okay, in the not wasting. And that is beautiful, absolutely perfect cornmeal. For my next trick, I have another oatmeal or cornmeal container full of the red corn. Same batch, same corn out of our field, just some of it comes out red, some of it comes out yellow, even have a little bit of blue. I've kind of already cleaned it. I'm stirring it a little bit more and still getting some of that out, but again, you know, that'll sift out the last. What I wanted to try here, it's not really that this corn is any different, it's just that, you know, I thought it'd be fun. And I wanted to try this with the grinder already tightened down all the way. And let's see what we get here. Red corn, but yellow meal's coming out. And see, most of that red is going to come out. It's just the skin. The inside is still yellow. But that is coming out pretty good the first run through. Let's see if this... So we're about near the end of what I put in here. Okay, that ought to be enough for us to see whether that's going to grind fine the first round or not. So do the same trick. Run it through here. And you can see what's going to be left in there is the skins. And off of this red corn, all that red skin is left in there. I could run this back through. There's a little bit of coarse meal in there, but since most of it is just the skin, I'm not going to. Now, you do get a little bit of that in there. It does give it a color. I used some at Thanksgiving. We really didn't notice much of the color in the final product in our cornmeal that I made for the dressing. But let's compare that to the yellow. This was run through twice. This is run through once. This might be a little more coarse, but I gotta say I can't really. This might be a little more fine, having been run through another time. So if you want it fine, run it through another time. That's my suggestion. Okay, I'm going to do the rest of this up. Okay, so I do have to say that this, having gone through twice, is a little fluffier than this is. So I could totally put that back through. But I wasn't expecting to stand here and turn the grinder all by myself today, and I'm getting tired. So if I decide I want it fluffier later, then we'll go that way. And this time I was smart enough to put a bowl underneath it. Now this is surprising, and I could kind of tell as it was happening. I would have sworn that there was very nearly a full canister of yellow corn, and this was, you know, not completely full. This seems to have filled up the canister to about the same line as the corn that was in it. It might be because it's a finer grind that it settles in there better. But anyway, that was our yield from the corn we had in there. Now I'm going to move on to sorghum. Okay, so on to sorghum. This is the black amber sorghum. Last year's red coral and Tennessee tall girl. I've got some of the Tennessee tall girl here. The crops didn't do very well. Red coral I've already used some. This is the Tennessee tall girl. You can see it has a rounder, nicer seed. It's great for grain. So is the red coral. The black amber is a tougher little thing. It's not the superior one for flour or grain. This is the superior one for syrup. Because if you'll remember when we were pressing, even though it had a thinner cane, a lot of syrup came out of it. So anyway, the reason I pointed that out is the Tennessee tall girl, and the red coral, you can just about get the seeds off just with your hands. Okay, the black amber, to get it all to come off with your hands, you'd have to sit here and pick each one. It's tough. So somebody else gave me this suggestion, and it really worked. Just a curry comb, like you curry a horse with, except, you know, I prefer one that's clean, not one that has horsehair in it. And this sorghum has been drying since last September, so it's coming off pretty easy. And we're going to set those aside because we'll want them. These are going to be our brooms here when we get around to making brooms. So we're keeping that. Now, as I'm doing this, and honestly, I tried this a couple of months ago and it wasn't dry enough. It was still very hard to do. You're going to takes a minute, but you get all these seeds off, and actually this is going pretty well. Okay, so I'm going to need more, but I want to pop on to the next step here. Okay, you should winnow this in front of like the fan or something to blow some of that stuff away. I'm going to see if I can. It's a small seed, so you know some of it might fall through, but no, it looks like we can clean it pretty well the same way we did with the corn. Now, the trick here is there are going to be some bits like that didn't come off, where the whole little stem came off, and we don't want to grind that in. So you're going to have to pick those out by hand. But if you're going to cook this grain like rice, and I did do that with some of the red coral, and then you can clean it like this as best you can. Take it in and put it in your pot of water, and these little bits like this will float to the top, and you can get those out then. Since we're grinding this and we don't want to put it in water, I'm going to be like rubbing it against the side. I'll use that other screen and we'll get it cleaned up. So I'll be back in a few. Actually, let me run this really quick through here too. Let's just try that. By rubbing it against that screen, I ought to get some of those stems to come out. And you'll notice here that by rubbing it against this screen, I'm also getting more of the little outside hull pieces to come out than came out just through the sieve. But yeah, it's going to take me a minute to go through to get these little stems out. So I'll be back. I have the sorghum grain, the black amber, and I'm going to put it in here. And it's not as perfectly cleaned up. That's a big stem. But we did what we could do. This caught a lot of the stems. There we go. Back over there. Okay, so what fell in the bowl, clean that out, and now, believe it or not, if I can get this puppy any tighter, I'm gonna try, because now, you know, every time I tighten it, makes it harder to turn. I think I still can. I want to try to grind this fine. Okay, still had a little bit of corn in there. Thought I cleaned it out. Okay, again, still had a little corn. Pigs will enjoy having a little corn and a little black amber. Okay, so now it should be black amber. That is coarse. Might have been a little bit more. Now remember, we're trying to do this the way that would have done 100 years ago. There are easier ways now to grind, but we're off grid. We're doing without power, so this is our power. There we are. Hey, not bad for an old gal who had spinal surgery almost exactly 1 year ago. I'm pretty tough. That came through. We're going to do the same thing of pouring it through to sift. A little easier if I sift it into the big bowl. So it's going to have the same thing. There's going to be lots of holes come out of it. I mean, whole grain's one thing, but, you know, you don't want all the trash. Now, I sincerely believe in using the whole grain. One of the problems with all the rice and the flour and things we get is they're taking off the hulls, the whole grain, and leaving us with just that nice little white kernel that's inside, with rice or wheat, either one. And that lovely little white kernel that's inside is the sugar. And so you're getting all the sugar and none of the fiber. And that's what's wrong with the whole grain. I mean, sorry with it not being whole grain. Because, I mean, basically, and I always knew this, but we really found out when we all started having to take care of our diabetes problems around here, that if it's white, it's poison. White flour, white sugar, white rice, they're adding to the problem. Okay, that is unbelievable, but I'm telling you, I'm touching this, there's not much grain in that. Almost all of what's in here is just hulls. And those hulls if you made up flour with all of the, or made up bread with all of this in it, those little bits would not be pleasant. You want some of that in there. You don't want that much. That's crazy. And this is why, again, the black amber is not considered, yay, great for the as a grain. It's more of the, it's a compromise. You can use it as a grain. It's mostly for the syrup, but that is pretty nice. Okay, be right back. So I sifted that out, and really about half of it was trash. Even though I had that about as tight as I could move the handle, I'm going to run this through again and see if we can get it a little softer, because right now I wouldn't really call it flour. It's pretty hard. So once again, try to tighten that down a little bit. See if I can get it to move. Here we go. Okay. Now let's clean that up and see what we get. All right, so get smart this time. Put that in a little bowl first. Dump it back through the sifter, because I did notice a little bit more. Some of that was left in the grinder from last time. Had the hole still in there. But sifting through pretty fast. Still a surprising amount of holes, even though some of that was left in the grinder from last time. That's still quite a bit left in there. Okay, that's somewhere between cornmeal and flour. See? Okay, so not really a light flour, but I'd say this compares to like a whole wheat flour. It's definitely fluffy. It's a flour. Because we didn't have a huge harvest last year, and because I don't want to use up everything testing, I bought some sorghum syrup and some sorghum flour. And so, as you can tell, I haven't been in this yet. So I haven't seen what we're looking at here. Oh boy, that's flour. I'm going to have to say that their milling process might be a tad better than mine, because that is a soft. Now, it doesn't say what, it just says ingredients sorghum. It doesn't say what variety they used. I do have to tell you that when I ground up the red coral before, it came out fluffy. It came out just like this. As soft as any flour. But there's their nice soft flour, and there's what I ground. Again, some of it's the mill, sure, but I think a lot of it is the variety of the sorghum. So if you're wanting a grain sorghum, plant a grain sorghum. And I recommend the red coral highly. And I don't have any of it right now because I used it up. All right, on to the next thing. I am going to light my oven. My outdoor chambers, which we realize we need to work on adjusting the flame a little bit in the oven, because we've been getting a little soot, which means the air mix isn't exactly right. Not dangerous because it's outside. And I'm going to set that thermostat on 400, and we're going to pretend that it's accurate. But I'm also going to keep an eye on the thermometer that I've got inside the oven. Okay, so I'm going to make a couple of kinds of cornbread. The first thing I'm going to do, it's funny, I brought measuring spoons out here, and then I thought, what the heck am I going to measure? I'm not even sure what the measurements are supposed to be. So because I'm just going to make cornbread the way I make cornbread. I'm putting a glob of lard into each pan. I think that glob's bigger than that glob. Yeah, about like so. That might be a little much. I honestly am not sure what too much would look like. I've put a lot in before and it still comes out good. Okay, so what I'm going to do with these, I've got two 8-inch skillets because I'm going to make two different kinds of cornbread. But for right now, I'm putting them both in there to melt that lard. Okie dokie. The next thing I'm going to do is I am going to make one batch that is just made with our cornmeal that we ground. So I'm taking my little 1 cup measure and I'm going to measure 1 cup, 2 cups. 2 cups of our nice fluffy cornmeal that we made today. Okay. And into that, I am going to put some, that's what the measuring spoon's for, so I have something to reach in here with. About, that much baking powder. Maybe not a full tablespoon. I put some in. About that much salt. Some people put sugar in their cornmeal. I think that's an abomination. But this time, I am going to put sorghum in. Now, I'm not putting sorghum in to make it sweet. And oddly enough, it won't make it sweet. I'm putting it in to be the emulsifier because I'm not going to use an egg. And I'm doing this. This will be a gluten-free, egg-free cornmeal. I could just, it would be gluten-free, you know, even if I put the egg in it. The reason I'm doing this is just to show that you can use sorghum as an emulsifier. An emulsifier is what binds your ingredients together. Like if you're making meatloaf and you put an egg in to hold it all together. That's what it's for. Okay, so the sorghum works the same way. It'll work as an emulsifier to hold this together. I'm going to put in this amount, you know, making 2 cups of meal in there, I would normally put 1 egg in. And wow, I wondered why that was bulged so high on the top. Now I know. Had a little pressure in there. Okay, so I am going to put about the size of what 1 egg would be. That's the way I've been doing it, is I'm putting a blop. Now this is sorghum that I bought. I gotta say I had my doubts. I thought it might be too harsh because a lot of times the sorghum you get is more like molasses and is not not sweet, not tasty, but this is pretty darn good. Yeah. Oh yeah, I'd eat that. So, I got that. Now, I'm so fancy that I keep my milk in a pitcher. That's just not true at all. We were out of milk, so we made some instant milk. We rehydrated some dehydrated, because hey, we're preppers. We have things like that on hand. And yeah, we're dumb, and we ran out of milk. So, now, I put in as much as I think it needs. That's how I do things. That might be a little on the runnier side. But I think it's going to be fine. So that's my wet ingredients stirred in. One more thing to do. Take the hot lard right out of the oven. Leave that one in there for another minute. And I'm going to put that around, make sure the sides get oiled. Everything's Pan is greased, and pour that all in. Now, my mom always told me that after you've poured the hot grease in, you've started that baking powder working, so don't fool around. Get it mixed, get it back in the pan, get it in the oven. And so that's what I'm going to do. So that's going in there. Okay, trying to scrape this out really well because I'm going to use this bowl again in just a second. All right. That is in there. That is our own cornbread, but unfortunately somebody else's sorghum. Okay, I'm going to pop that one in, pop this one out. Well, or at least to the front. We'll keep it in there to stay warm. Still, that oven is not quite up to temperature. That's okay, it'll get started. Now, plan B. I'm going to use our red flour that we did today. It'll be fun, change it up some. But I'm just going to use 1 cup of red cornmeal. I said flour, I mean meal. And I am going to use 1 cup of this fine, fluffy, gorgeous sorghum flour. Now, the thing about sorghum flour is, just like cornmeal or corn flour, that is not a gluten flour. So it doesn't have the binding qualities, and it will need an emulsifier. Now, I talk a little bit about gluten-free and worrying about these things, and it's not just because, okay, I'll pour that in something else because I can't reseal that bag. But it's not just because it's a fad. I have a daughter and a granddaughter who have celiac disease in varying degrees. My daughter's is very, very bad, and we are very careful about contamination. And I'm always looking for things so she can have the food she's accustomed to, because it's harsh to have half of your food taken away from you. Okay, so I have put in the sorghum flour, the cornmeal, the baking powder. I'm throwing in my salt again, and we'll stir my dry ingredients, which is a little tricky because the bowl's kind of wet, but that's okay, we'll be fine. Stir those together. Again, about one egg's worth of sorghum, or be liberal with it, it's fine. I made a double batch of cornmeal the other day, and I used a little better than 2 tablespoons of the sorghum syrup. And it was funny, like I said, I don't like sweet cornmeal or cornbread at all. Don't. I think it's a different thing. It's a cake. It's not cornbread. But with the sorghum in it, you can kind of taste the sorghum, but it's a flavor, not a sweet. Now, if you're diabetic like me, see, you can't fix everything. I can use this as a substitute for eggs because some of us are, including me, sensitive to eggs, but makes the glycemic index go up on the cornmeal to where it is not diabetic friendly. So, put some milk in there. We know that uh-oh, I may have gone a little overboard with the milk on this one. Ah, yikes, I got carried away. The oil is already up to temperature, I know that, so since I went crazy there, I'm going to put in about another ½ cup of that sorghum flour, and I'm going to just go nuts and put in a little bit more cornmeal as well, so I'm kind of keeping the ratio there 1-to-1. Again, you may have noticed I'm not real big on measurements. I cook by feel. Now, I make the kids measure everything, level it off, and do exactly as the recipe says, because that's the way I started out. I've been cooking for 45 years. I can take a shortcut if I want to. Okay, so the next thing will be our fat. Take the fat out of the fire. Now this pan, the other one is like an antique. It's an old, well-seasoned little skillet. This one is new. It's like one you can pick up for nothing at Walmart. And it is a little bumpy, a little rough inside. So I'm making darn sure I've got oil wrapped all the way around that one, because I have a feeling it's going to want to stick. Again, once that hot fat is in there, you want to make this kind of quick. So I stir that in. I throw this back in the pan. Quite frankly, I thought that 2 cups of meal in the last cornbread looked like it didn't fill the pan up very full. So I don't mind that we've added a little bit more flour to this one, because it's going to be a nice big pan of cornbread. Well, a big small pan of cornbread. I normally make a double recipe if I'm making cornbread for the family. Now, you notice this is more of a brown look than your bright yellow that you're used to. That's the difference in the corn. This is that red corn, and even the other one had a little more color to it. All right, it goes in the oven. It's going to go in the oven with the other one. I'll keep an eye on them when they're done. I'll let you see what we got. Okay, it's time. Let's go in for the big reveal. I'm going to reach to the back first and get our... This is our all cornmeal. And that, man, that looks like cornbread to me. And this one is our cornmeal sorghum flour. Definitely tell because it's the one that's more full, so yeah. And I'm going to poke at it a little bit. Yeah, that looks cooked. It looks good. Okay, we're going to have these for dinner tonight. That piece is pretty good. Like I said, you can taste the sorghum. Not overly sweet. We're going to have these tonight for dinner. I'll let you know what everybody's opinion is, which one's best. But the main thing is, do they look like they're going to hold together? And I would say, yes, they do. It doesn't look like that's going to just crumble. And that is the problem that we're wanting to solve with using the sorghum, not the egg. Is it going to actually emulsify, hold it together? I say yes, it is going to. All right, I'll let you know how they turn out, but that one bite was good. So here we go. This is the all cornmeal one, and I'll put it like this. This one is all cornmeal and sorghum as the emulsifier, and yep, there is nothing crumbly about that. That is held together just fine. This one is the, I need a pot holder. This one is the, sorghum flour and cornmeal. By the way, neither one of them stuck to the pan, so that's nice. And it lifts out. Hey, that looks just fine. So there's the comparison. All cornmeal, sorghum flour and cornmeal. No eggs. That's pretty awesome. Okay, that's it.
Okay. We're rolling.
Okay.
Still going.
That's what we call an oopsie.